So, good morning to everyone. Allow me to say two words, one in Portuguese and the other one in Greek. I'm very glad to be here because actually I'm Portuguese, but I'm working in Athens. So I think it's very nice to see these two countries that are connected to my heart together. So, bom dia, kalimera, to all of you. So, today I will try to bring you some perspectives, not probably on the high-tech side of the health sector, but how we made decisions. Because in the end of the day, health provision is about decision-making processes at the individual level and also at the public health level, meaning the population level. So we also need to look for decision-making process to see where we stand and where we can use new technologies to improve the process. Because as COVID-19 showed, the decision-making process that we are being taught for decades can be not anymore adapted to the challenges. So I would like to start by, should I speak like this? It's better, no? No, you cannot hear. Okay. Okay, perfect. So, some years ago, I was in this place, which is actually in Lisbon, very close by the building where we are, Lisbon Medical School, and I was taught that as a medical student, since the time of Hippocrates, which is also Greek, as you know, medicine has struggled to balance the uncontrolled experience of healers with observations obtained by rigorous investigation of claims regarding the effects of health interventions. Meaning that we are all taught as medical students that decisions are critical and we should abandon anything that is not evidence-based. And that's why we are very familiar with decision-making processes that are grounded in good data and in good clinical trials. We usually teach these pyramids to medical students, saying that we should base our decisions in this top of the pyramid kind of studies, such as randomized controlled trials or at least case control studies, and try to avoid expert experience or very individual scenarios that are not very well grounded in evidence. However, if we go for the history of evidence-based medicine, like showed in this paper published in Lancet. Thank you. So, as this paper showed, should I sit there?
It also might be airplanes, aircraft, just like over here.
That's good. Okay, thank you. So, I think it's better now. So, as you can see here, decisions is not all about evidence. And evidence-based medicine is very young field. It's not more than 1/4 century, so it's 25 years, more or less. And the original evidence-based medicine framework included 4 pillars for a decision. And we are forgetting 3 of them, because we are so focused on the quality of the evidence and the type of studies that we should base our decisions on, that we are forgetting the other 3 pillars of a decision process, which are magnitude of benefits and harms, values and preferences, and availability of resources. So a decision is a composite of 4 pillars. It's not only the evidence, because I can have the best evidence in some specific study, but if I cannot implement that good evidence to a certain population, what should I do next? Should I just say, no, I will not do it? Or should I start thinking on how to do the best I can with the things I have? So that's why coming out from the medical school to the real world, we see a completely different reality. Because in real world, you see a huge landscape of topics that are interfering with decision-making processes. I would like to call your attention for this document published by WHO, showing the landscape of health decisions. And it's not only about guidelines that usually come from very high-quality studies, but it's also about health technology assessments and other kinds of informed policy making that is coming, for instance, from real-world data. But more than that, be aware that the studies coming from scientific data then need to go through a very complex regulatory and legal framework before they can be translated in decisions that affect all the population in a certain area or country. Meaning this is very, very complex. And that's why today a decision-making process is not anymore only for experts that focus on that specific field. It's much more for a multidisciplinary group of experts that can predict, that can help to implement the decision. And look for this circle here, also coming from a very nice document from WHO. Usually we are taught that guideline development is basically the second step here, which is about put the right questions to the evidence we have, access and appraise the evidence, and synthesize the evidence and issue a guideline. But nowadays is only one of a much more complex process to provide support for decision-making processes. First of all, we need to establish the priorities. It's not anymore possible to try to have guidelines for everything. We need to decide which are the topics we should prioritize. And probably you are thinking, could this be helped or informed by machine learning processes? Because different countries probably have different realities, and it's not about publishing guidelines for everything because it's not feasible. But also, look, it's design implementation, communication and engagement with all the people, including the users of the system. And we cannot stop here. We need to monitoring, we need to evaluate, and we need to sustain change and expand our implementation to a wider context. So decision-making processes are even more complex nowadays, and there are many challenges that these kind of frameworks were going through during COVID-19. And why? Because our world today is defined by this acronym, VUCA. Our world today is actually characterized by its volatility, its uncertainty, its complexity, and its ambiguity. So these four words define the world we live in nowadays, and it's quite complex to make decisions in this complexity and uncertainty. Because one of the things that I would like to share with you is probably you know that the average time to develop a guideline in one of the most renowned institutions in the world in the UK, called NICE, is 18 to 24 months. Could you imagine waiting this time to deal with COVID-19? It's impossible. No one will accept this time frame. So we also need to speed up the process in a way that it does not compromise the quality of the recommendations. So actually, when we were facing COVID-19 in Portugal some years ago, and I guess for all the other countries in the world, especially in Europe, it was the same, we faced a huge challenge because we are dealing with a disease that no evidence is available. So we were stuck in the process. We know that we need to start by questioning the evidence, to have evidence to support the decisions, but then the evidence was not available. So all the pillars that we were taught in medical school were not there. But we need to provide answers to the population and to the policymakers. So This is actually a challenge, making the case that we cannot only rely on evidence. We need to also sometimes, in very specific situations, to go for other methods to address common problems that are affecting all the world. And this is why this citation coming from a journal of medical ethics is quite impressive. It was published in 2021, and it says that good public health decisions require nuanced, sophisticated ethical reasoning, which is vital in ascribing value and normative judgment to empirical facts, and quantifiable empirical data and scientific evidence, though essential, are almost never sufficient. Making the case that we are talking about people are complex, and we need to tailor our decisions and our data to this human complexity. So I would like to start transitioning for the second and last part of my presentation, showing you a bit how the decision-making process of the national immunization program for COVID-19 was done in Portugal. So usually the framework for decision-making for national immunization programs are based on the 5 topics that are in the top of this diagram. We start by a question, what we would like to know. We go for the evidence. We go for an expert panel that will distill and reflect on the evidence, mainly to bring values, preferences, resource evaluation, feasibility concerns, and so on. Then we draft the guideline, and we advise the decision-making, and then we need to implement and to monitoring all the process. So in red, you can see the challenges we faced during this process, and also gaps in which we identified potential new roles for innovative tools to help decision-making processes. First of all, the evidence was very scarce because the studies were very few, as you know, and we need to focus much more on real-world evidence, not clinical trials and randomized clinical trials, but data that are coming live from what is going on in all the countries and with all different populations. So we faced a flooding from real-world evidence that we are not used to deal with because the data is much more fragmented, is much more of low quality, it's much more difficult to interpret, is not controlled in many of the cases, but it was the only data available. So this is one of the things we are moving forward in decision-making processes, which is bringing much more real-world data. How to deal with this amount of data is one of the questions, but also one of the advantage of this is that we are dealing probably with data that is much more connected with real life and not clinical and controlled environments. The second thing is, of course, resource and feasibility, but I would like to bring here the global context, because this is probably one of the things we face nowadays. Some years ago, decision-making processes were done in silos. Each country was safe, because no one was aware of what is going on the other countries, so people trust. But now, we probably know before the national decision what is going on in France or what is going on in the UK or the US or in Singapore. So we are now having a much more scrutinized decision-making process, and the experts are not ready for it because they don't want to be questioned. So this is also a challenge. How can we interfere and how can we have this decision-making process which is much more exposed to public scrutiny, but also much more complex because we are not only receiving the inputs from data from clinical trials, but also from real-world data, not from our country, but from all the world, including media and other kinds of information dissemination. And finally, of course, final decision is an important component, and you will see in my last 2 slides why. Because usually the technical advice is coming from a group of experts that sometimes don't know how to communicate with policymakers because the language is different. So it's really important to also to bridge this communication gap that sometimes appears, and this is also very important to even wider more the group of experts that we include. And probably communication experts are also relevant since the beginning of the process. So I think to innovate in decision-making processes, we need to look for three very, very big challenges we have. One is time, the other one is experts and stakeholders, and the other one is communication. So regarding time, we all want faster decisions, but without losing safety and quality. So this is where, So this is where probably AI tools, machine learnings can help us and support the decision-making process, because if we can speed here this algorithm that is a classical algorithm for decision-making guidelines developments, and if we shorten all the periods of research, consensus achievement with tools that we were not able to have some years ago, it will deal with time in a wise way. Regarding experts and stakeholders, I would also like to call your attention for this very interesting book. It's called Noise, and it shows how we can be much more influenced than we think. When we have a group of experts, the first person that speaks sets the tone. Imagine a group of experts with a very big, full professor from a university and 3 of his previous PhD students. Even though if they do not agree, if the full professor is the first to speak, they will say, yes, of course, he's a professor. So these kind of things also exist in decision-making processes, and we need to find ways from the behavioral component on how to deal with it. And finally, communication. When we communicate, and this is very relevant in terms of trust, connecting a bit on the AI panel that we heard in the morning, how can we communicate the new tools without mining the trust, not only from the professionals, but also from the patients? One of the things that I learned when I was dealing with this process was it is very, very useful to communicate the process. Let's explain how the process is, its complexities, its nuances. This is critical, so we also probably should explain how things are being developed, because this is a very good way to build trust. And I would like to end here, trying to make the case and probably giving the floor to a more AI-oriented session, just to saying that decision-making processes can also be looked in a way that we can innovate them, because in the end, we are looking always for decisions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Walter. Thank you. Have made the space for several questions and comments, but as we agreed, so I will give the floor now to Maria João, and then we will have time to discuss a little bit more. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. So I'm here to talk about a different type of innovation, about user-driven innovation and how AI can influence the user skills regarding the innovation process. So to help you with that, because maybe some of you are not so used to this user-driven innovation, I will present you this project called Patient Innovation, and then go to the AI influence part. Okay, so this is the traditional, let's call it, producer innovation value network, where I think you all are pretty much comfortable with, but usually patients are pretty much seen as end users, so they are not really involved in the process. Of course, in trials they're part of it, but regarding the process itself, they are only seen as final users. Okay. But here today I'm going to talk about, for example, these two guys. So they had different problems. So you, for example, lost his legs in an accident, and Amit is paralyzed. And both of them were not happy with the solutions available in the market, so a need made them innovate. So you create the first bionic legs, and Amit create the first exoskeleton for people like him. So to these people we call patient innovators or user innovator in general, but since we are talking about healthcare, let's call them patient innovators. So this concept actually came from research. And what we saw is that, indeed, a significant percentage of patients and caregivers consider that they innovate in their daily life due to their needs. And although the solutions that they create significantly improve their quality of life, they do share with their local community of patients, but they do not really share with the medical community, for example. And I think you can understand why. Some might feel judged or scared about the regulations and all that, so it's a complex system. And so we now have two innovations landscapes, let's say. So the producers are really focused on cost-benefit analysis because they do not create stuff to lose money for sure. But then we have patients that they just want to solve their own problems. So some of them are willing to actually lose money for sure, but if they are reading from the burden that they have, they will feel okay with that. So we have these two networks. And this is the one that I showed you before. And now we have this that sounds like kind of a circle of patients who have ideas, patients who are innovators and go a little bit further, or passive patients or adopters. And so, as I told you, we have this problem identification. So patients do know their needs very well. They do innovate, but they rarely diffuse it. So patient innovation came up as a solution for that. So the project started as a platform for those who have ideas can share with others. The solutions are only available after a medical validation for safety of the community, and others who have other needs might search for symptom, by condition, by body location, and find that solution, and it's a circle. So this is a platform that I invite you to check it out if you don't know it yet. And at this moment, we already have 300,000 users worldwide, and actually these numbers are a little bit updated, but 2,000 solutions already medically approved and available in the platform. And they range from different types of things. So I will show you just a few examples. We have really simple approaches. For example, Diogo has this condition that affects his muscles and joints. And he found out that if he played the piano every day, the condition would not progress. So this was something that he found out by himself, was not the doctor who told him. So it was something that he found out. Or you have, for example, this example from Tal. He has Marfan syndrome, which is a condition that affects your heart. And so he was supposed to die in a few months, but he created a cardiac support, and he's alive, and he already applied that support to 1,000 users already. And this is the most straightforward category, let's say. It's the patient, so I'm developing something for me, okay? But you also have caregivers. Caregivers are a really relevant category in the healthcare part. So you have, again, really simple solutions. So you can see Debbie. Debbie has a kid with cerebral palsy. And so with a simple Velcro system, she created a support that the kid is connected to her legs. And this way, the kid gets the feeling of walking that otherwise he will never have. Or you have a little bit more complex solutions like this case. So David A. has a kid with cystic fibrosis. For those who don't know, it's a disease that implies really stressful and annoying treatments that for kids are not so easy. So he created a video game that the kid, instead of using the keyboard to go up and down with a hero, she can do that with the breathing exercises, and this way she's having fun and doing the treatment at the same time. And then we have a third category that we call collaborators, who are people who don't have the disease, they're not solving that for their kids, but they just want to help. And you can see this example. So Ivan Owen is a guy who created manual prosthetics for kids. So you can print this in a 3D printer and assemble like a Lego. It costs like 15 euros, and you can provide the opportunity for a kid to have a hand. And while they are growing, they can print it again, adapt the measures, and it's a cheap way for families to feel engaged and to have a solution. Okay, and it's funny that Walter was talking about COVID. So COVID was a stressful time for everybody, for decision makers, but for patients and the families as well. So we also got a lot of solutions in just the first weeks of the outbreak, and all came from users. So for example, these masks with a transparent part in your lips, it's important for people who need to read lips in their daily lives. And it's normal that the producers don't remember that because probably they don't have anyone with that problem in their institution. But for users, it's something that, of course, they will need it like since day one. Okay, and this is one of our favorite activities, is our awards, Patient Innovation Awards. We try to combine this in really big events, so people like you can know them, and also maybe feel motivated to innovate yourself. Maybe now you go home and you'll think about it, and maybe you already innovate and you didn't know, or you have a new idea to develop. We also have this boot camp where we try to, because a lot of these patients feel scared about the regulatory approach of the healthcare system, which is kind of normal. So we try to bring it to the market, because bringing it to the market is actually the best way to disseminate a solution. These are just a few startups. And before we go to the AI part, I just want to call your attention to the team. So we are a small team, but we have the Dean of Nova School of Business and Economics and the Dean of Nova Medical School as the founders. We have really nice people like Sofia as part of the medical team and support us whenever we need. But I also would like to call your attention to maybe you know some of them. So Bob Langer from Moderna, probably some of you recognize them in our advisory board. But we have two Nobel laureates that I would like to call your attention, but especially to this guy. So, of course, it's really nice to have Nobel laureates in our advisory board for several reasons, but this guy came to our advisory board not because he's a Nobel laureate, but because he's the father of a kid who got an accident and has special needs for several years now. So he totally understands the project. He's himself a caregiver innovator, and he has been great and a great friend since day one. But we are talking here about AI and how AI can influence these innovation skills. And I will skip a few examples because of the time. But some of them are already incorporating AI in their solutions. You have, for example, this example here.
Hi, I'm Conrad. I'm from the University of Warsaw and from our bionics team. And today I wanted to show you how my voice sounds like normally with the electronic larynx.
And how it could sound with the Raspberry software or other voice conversion technology of the future. So, right now, my voice sounded like that. But
It could sound like that.
Or like that. I can play with it and choose from the variety of voices. And I'm really glad that Gora and Transmitter are collaborating on this because
I believe this is the future of technology for voice inspired individuals.
So Conrad was in our bootcamp. He was one of the winners of the Patient Innovation Awards. That's why I introduced those activities before, so you can understand a little bit how we frame this. I have other examples, but I will not waste time on that. Yeah, like this one and this one. But let's check this one. Maybe some of you know. Have you ever used Be My Eyes, either as a volunteer, maybe? You did, okay. So Be My Eyes is an app for blind or low vision people. In the beginning, it started with a volunteer approach. So I could be a volunteer, someone can call me, and with the video of their phone, I could describe them what they were saying. For example, it was very useful in the supermarket. For example, what is this can? Is it like sausage or beans? So for a blind person, it's hard to distinguish, of course. And that was the basis of the project. But now Hans has low vision. He's the founder of the project. And now he's adapting and using AI. So instead of using volunteers, AI now does the job.
Is the king in...
Yes, it looks like the king is in residence right now. The royal standard flag is flying above Buckingham Palace, which is the signal that the monarch is present. How exciting to be there while the king is home.
Try and tell me exactly what they're doing right now, please.
Right now the ducks are gently gliding across the water. They're moving in a fairly relaxed manner, not in a hurry. Occasionally, one of them will dip its head under the water, probably looking for food, and then pop back up.
I even know when a taxi is coming with its orange light on. I think I'll hail it to get home.
Yes, I spotted one just now. It's heading your way on the left side of the road. Get ready to wave it down.
Okay, so you can see the impact that this kind of solution can have to people.
Set to go. That's a good dog right there, leading the way.
This is another one. Okay, so remember Tal, I introduced you a few moments ago. So let's imagine, what if Tal, when he got that problem, he could use AI. So for example, if you ask to ChatGPT, can you provide instructions to a 3D print to our Arctic support? Of course, the ChatGPT is very polite and advise you that's dangerous, be careful, blah, blah, blah. But if you ask for learning purposes, actually, he kind of helps. So prepare for printing, 3D printing, validation. So he can guide you kind of in that innovation process. Or, for example, even in the style. So this is of course, a dumb example, but you can understand my point. So a Louis Vuitton style or a Harvard style. So it could help Tal develop his product if he would want something like this. Or, for example, the Be My Eyes example. Can the design of Be My Eyes be improved for blind, low vision people as compared to holding the phone? Because for now, people need to hold the phone. Maybe AI can give new ideas. And one of the ideas is, instead of holding the phone, maybe use some glasses with the camera on. And this way, people don't need to hold stuff. I have other examples, but I will skip it. Yeah, just to finish. So you can see that AI can actually be really present in the entire process, either in the idea generation, the specification, the prototyping, and validation as well. But also, if you think about it, also in the dissemination route, can actually help to create a new firm. And we don't have time for that, but now you have Gen AI for pretty much everything, to create your logo, your website, your app, whatever that is. Or, for example, different ways to free sharing. So, just concluding, AI is already really implemented in the innovation process in different steps. It will accelerate in different ways, and I have here some questions that I think we should think about. For example, will people be limited by AI suggestions? I think some people already are, so we trust a lot in the answers that ChatGPT or other tool give us. So on one hand, of course, it's nice, but it can also kind of kill our creativity, and that's something that we need to explore. How will work with IP? That's also something that, I don't know, maybe you discussed that before this morning, I don't know. But it's something that it will kind of have an impact. Of course, AI will suggest good and bad ideas. Of course, people already have good and bad ideas, we know that. But this will be a completely different magnitude. And, of course, the legal constraints. So at this stage, using AI in Europe, it's different comparing to using AI in America or China. So that will be something that we need to think about as well. And that was it. So here's my email and the websites. Feel free to check it out. And if you, of course, I will be happy to answer to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Maria João. And I think now we can open the floor for some questions, comments. We don't have much time, but at least 10 minutes we can manage to... Okay.
Thank you. Jenny, actually, from Walter and Marie-Jean, how could you see, as we have a lot of legal people here, how could you all boost this type of solutions and having the focus on humanity in the future, not just in right now, but how can we join together? How do you see that? Because we all want that. We are aware that there's amazing work out there, like patient innovation. I think it's one of the best examples. We have people like Walter in OMS that have the same mindset. How can we make this connection or this switch for the future?
Okay, on my view, and I think it's already happening, it will climb, but the answer is not just user innovation or just traditional producing, it will be co-creation. And so I think if we involve users in the process, as one of the boxes that Walter was showing, it will change everything. Because, and I understand that sometimes it's hard to understand what people need, and people are confusing and complex, like Walter was saying, that's totally true. But if you find the right mechanism and the right processes to involve everyone, I think that will be the answer. But I think it's already happening. A lot of pharmaceutical companies, medtech companies are already involving patients. I can tell you the bootcamp has been rising some interest with a lot of interesting companies, big companies, which is a good sign. So I will say that's the future.
Thank you for the question. It's quite complex, the answer, and of course I don't know the answer, but I can share some thoughts on that. I guess we listened in the morning about trust, and trust is quite important. We need to build trust in the society as a whole. And probably we need to change the way we communicate about these topics, because I'm not a lawyer, of course, but sometimes there is this feeling that we need to establish regulations to protect from the threat of these kind of tools and digital support and so on. So I think it's not about being a threat, because we are not under threat. I think that the topic should be how can we find a balance for a complementary positioning of the human provider and the AI-supported provision of care. And probably this could also be communicated in a way that this also can bring more well-being to the professionals, because they will probably have more time to do things they would like to do, not only as a professional, but also as a person in their own life. So I think it's always also to communicate this widely in a complementary way, and not we are having a fight between the traditional way and the new way.
Thank you. More questions? Everyone wants to go to the lunch break. Okay.
Following up on the comment that was just made, one of the questions I always ask is what should come first, innovation or regulation? When you ask the scientists, they give you the story that no, we need regulation because we don't know how to innovate without the regulatory framework. When you ask the lawyers, they tell you, no, let the marketplace figure things out, and then, and lawyers, we can't do anything until a client comes with a problem. So how do you see the balance between regulation and innovation?
Thank you for giving me the floor for this. It's a very, very interesting question. Very interesting. I would probably share with you that probably the two things can evolve together. So if we look for the traditional way, just to give an example, because when we don't know the answer, we need to go for things that we know more or less. The previous discussions between researchers and policymakers was about researchers trying to make the case their ideas are the ideas that the world need, and then the policymakers will not uptake the ideas because policymakers says this is not the thing I need. So now we live in a world in which the interface between researchers and policymakers needs to be narrowed. So the needs are probably kicked off by the policymakers, and then the researchers come back. So probably we need much more collaboration and iterations between the two. Of course, it is very hard to regulate whether you don't know what you are regulating, but probably it's also because we see regulations in a very static way. Mm-hmm. Probably we also need to start preparing ourselves for a more dynamic way of regulating things. I remember a country in Northern Europe that has a very interesting legal system in which they put laws on proof. And then if the law is not okay, they remove the law. So it's kind of a very, for instance, for a Portuguese mindset, it could be a bit weird, but it's a new way also to innovate. So how can we have regulations that can adapt more easily and change? The problem will be also the length of the legal process. But I mean, probably we also look, and this was one of my points, let's try to innovate not only on the devices and technology, but also on the processes we are using them. Because probably we will always find this divide between the devices and the process. If we just want to keep the process as a classical approach and put on top of it the new devices, probably we also need to change the process as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just in 30 seconds, I agree. But I do believe that innovation kind of gives some ground to the regulation change. And I think we saw that in COVID. So the innovation was there, the regulations need to adapt very fast. And I think probably that will be easier. But although it's complex, and I'm afraid to say this, but yeah.
Okay, so I think we can finish. So thank you so much for the presentations, and I think it's, in fact, it's quite complex, the topic, and also the idea of working together and try to overcome this challenge are really interesting, and but probably, like Walter was mentioning and Maria, João, I think we have to think about innovation in a much more transversal area, and probably all of us has to think how can we innovate, researchers, academics, but also regulations, and the rhythm most of the time are not the same. So it's not only the challenge of what to do, but how to do it, and probably we have to, if we work more in together, maybe we can learn with each other. But in fact, it's quite complex, and that's why we are also here today to think about these kind of issues and give insights in this complexity. So thank you so much for being part of the session. I think now it's the lunch break, and we will come back later.